Remember when the future solved crime, banned swearing, and somehow turned Taco Bell into fine dining? In 1993, Demolition Man exploded into theaters from Warner Brothers, directed by Marco Brambilla and starring Sylvester Stallone as John Spartan, the loose cannon cop frozen in time, and Wesley Snipes as Simon Phoenix, the bleach-blonde mechanic who thawed out to tear a sanitized utopia apart. Sandra Bullock co-starred as Lenina Huxley, alongside Dennis Leary as underground rebel Edgar Friendly. The premise was gloriously simple. A violent cop and an even more violent criminal are cryogenically frozen in 1996 and revived in 2032, where physical contact is illegal, profanity comes with a fine, and the most dangerous weapon in society is a bad attitude. Today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about Demolition Man. And stick around for number 1, because the franchise wars, they weren't just in the script. They were happening in the editing room. And before we jump in, hit like, subscribe, and hype this video. It helps YouTube show this to more retro movie fans just like you. All right, let's take a trip to a far, far time, 2032. Number 15, Hollywood's greatest 3 seashells, unsolved mystery. Demolition Man predicted video calls, self-driving cars, and the death of physical contact. But the single greatest contribution that this movie made to American culture is a toilet gag that nobody can explain. 3 decorative seashells sit next to every toilet in San Angeles, completely unexplained. And the writers, they intended it that way. Screenwriter Daniel Waters was trying to dream up a futuristic bathroom. Already a career highlight, and he hit a wall. So he called up fellow screenwriter Larry Karashevsky for help. Karashevsky happened to be sitting in his bathroom at the time. He looked around and spotted a decorative bag of seashells on the toilet tank. He said it out loud. Waters wrote it down. A 30-year obsession was born from interior decorating and bad timing. Stallone's John Spartan stares at the shells in just total confusion, while Sandra Bullock's Lenina Huxley laughs at him. And every single person in the theater made that exact same face. We've been faking comprehension ever since. Fans, of course, tried to crack the code. Stallone himself offered a theory in 2006. 2 shells used like chopsticks, third one for scraping. The man delivered the answer like it was a public service, but Waters dismissed it as not futuristic enough, which is generous. Rob Schneider later suggested that the shells were decorative covers that hid toilet paper dispensers, and Waters called that cheating. And that's fair. A civilization that fines you for swearing isn't hoarding Charmin behind a conch shell. Number 14, Wesley Snipes broke the camera and then broke Stallone. Wesley Snipes holds black belts in Shotokan Karate and Hapkido, which is the kind of resume that makes you a terrible person to share a fight scene with. When cameras rolled on Demolition Man, the crew discovered this the hard way. Snipes was moving around so fast that his strikes were blurring on film. The monitors were picking up streaks of motion instead of clean impacts, which makes your villain look like a rendering error instead of a lethal maniac. Film cameras shoot at 24 frames per second, and Snipes, well, he treated that number like a personal insult. The fight coordinators had to pull him aside and ask him to slow down. They told him to movie fight, exaggerate the movements, stretch out the strikes, give the lens time to actually do its job. This man was just too good at hitting people, and they needed him to be worse at it. Stallone took a completely different approach to the problem. Instead of asking Snipes to pull punches, he strapped on Kevlar-style padding and reinforced body armor under his San Angeles police uniform so Snipes could actually connect. When Phoenix kicked Spartan in the ribs during that final showdown, there's a very real chance that boot landed with full force. The armor ate the impact, and Stallone ate the ego adjustment. That competitive energy between the two is exactly why their fights feel so raw and physical. Number 13, those future cars were worth more than the movie budget. Now, most sci-fi movies slap some fiberglass on a golf cart, they add a light strip, and just hope that nobody looks too closely. Demolition Man picked up the phone and convinced General Motors to hand over vehicles that cost more than most people's houses, like multiple houses. The futuristic cars gliding through San Angeles, they weren't props. They were actual concept car prototypes. The kind GMs keep behind velvet robes at auto shows so executives can gesture at them and say things like, "The future of mobility," while nobody's allowed to touch anything. And the star of the fleet was the 1992 GM Ultralight, a carbon fiber prototype with gull-wing doors and fuel efficiency that would make a Prius weep into its dashboard. For the film, they slapped a Chevrolet badge on it, because even in the dystopian future, someone's got to get a brand deal. GM sent over 18 concept cars. 16 ended up on screen. The total estimated value of the fleet was $69 million. The production team, showing a rare flash of survival instinct, built non-driving fiberglass shells for background shots and anything remotely risky. The original Ultralight still exists and has been displayed at the Peterson Automotive Museum in LA. And the thing still somehow looks like it belongs in 2035. Go figure. Number 12, a police deep cut named an entire movie. A Stallone action movie got its name from a post-punk song written in Peter O'Toole's guest bedroom. That's the kind of origin story only the early 90s could produce. Sting wrote Demolition Man in 1981 while staying at O'Toole's house in Ireland, because that's how rock stars brainstorm, of course. The track landed on the Police's Ghost in the Machine album. It was fast, it was frantic, and just soaked in that reggae rock chaos the band practically owned. Grace Jones actually released her version before the Police did. Her take on the song from the Nightclubbing album was stripped down, moody, and just dripping with that icy early 80s cool that makes everything sound vaguely threatening. So by 1993, this track had already lived two completely different lives before Stallone ever touched it. For the movie, Sting went back into the studio and re-recorded the whole thing with a harder, more industrial edge. Less reggae sway, more dystopian swagger. The retooled version fit the film's neon-soaked, corporate-controlled future so well that it scored a Grammy nomination for Best Rock Vocal Performance. Producer Joel Silver reportedly loved the original song so much that it actually inspired the film's title, an entire big-budget action movie named after a police deep cut. And somehow, that's one of the less weird things about the production. Number 11, Jackie Chan was considered for Simon Phoenix. Sylvester Stallone wanted Jackie Chan to play Simon Phoenix. Stallone personally reached out to Chan for the role, and the logic tracked. Elite martial artist, global star, incredible physical performance. The fight choreography alone would have been absurd, but Chan, he turned it down flat, and his reason was pure brand management. At the time, Chan was massive in Asia and carefully building his Hollywood footprint, and he had a strict rule. He didn't play villains, and he didn't play characters who died on screen. His audience, especially younger fans, saw him as the good guy. Playing a psychotic bleach blonde anarchist in a dystopian Stallone movie, well, that was about as far from that image as you could get without legally changing your name. So Chan walked, and the role landed on Wesley Snipes, and that single casting shift completely rewired the movie's DNA. Critics at the time quietly admitted something that probably stung Stallone a little. Snipes stole the entire movie, not by being bigger and louder, but by being genuinely unpredictable in every scene that he touched. Chan would have given Demolition Man a masterclass in choreography, but Snipes, he gave it a personality transplant. Number 10, Stallone's cryo scene was a real-life nightmare. So Sylvester Stallone had gone 12 rounds with Mr. T, survived a boxing match against a Soviet giant, and dangled off cliffs in Cliffhanger like gravity owed him money. And yet, one of the worst experiences of his professional life involved standing completely still inside a tube. The cryogenic freezing scene required Stallone to be sealed into a form-fitting mold, locked inside a cylindrical rig, and slathered in thick translucent gel to simulate cryofluid. He was trapped in that apparatus for 5 to 8 hours at a stretch. His arms and legs couldn't move, the gel made breathing feel wrong, and getting him out required actual tools. This wasn't a quick release situation. The critical detail here is that Stallone is extremely claustrophobic. He had spoken about it openly. So being vacuum sealed upright inside what amounted to a high-tech sarcophagus wasn't mildly uncomfortable. He described the experience as a living nightmare and reportedly told the crew that if he started screaming, they needed to get him out immediately. The problem being that immediately still meant several minutes of extraction while he stood there marinating in fake future slime. The scene is supposed to show Spartan calmly suspended in cryo-sleep. Stoic, frozen, heroic, but if you watch Stallone's face closely, that tension, it's not acting. That's a genuinely claustrophobic man who's white-knuckling his way through every second of that shoot. Number 9, DC Comics and a broken video game kept the brand alive. Demolition Man hadn't even finished its theatrical run before the 90s merchandising machine kicked the door in and started taking measurements. DC Comics, the people responsible for Batman and Superman, looked at a Stallone movie and said, yeah, we could stretch that into 4 issues. And they did. The Demolition Man miniseries launched in November of '93, mostly retelling the film's plot with extra internal monologue and deeper dives into San Angeles' sanitized society. It wrapped up in February of '94, timed perfectly to ride that VHS wave into every blockbuster on the planet. Then came the video game, and God bless the developers for trying. Versions dropped you into a side-scrolling shooter that felt like Contra had been left in the microwave for too long, and then randomly flipped to a top-down perspective like it had an identity crisis mid-development. The controls handled like a shopping cart with a broken wheel, and the difficulty spikes played like the game was actively punishing you for spending money on it. Now together, the comic and the game, they stretched Demolition Man's shelf life well past any movie deserved. Number 8, the movie was renamed in Kuwait. In Kuwait and several other Middle Eastern markets, Demolition Man wasn't released as Demolition Man. It went out as Rambo the Destroyer. The logic was beautifully shameless. Stallone's face plus muscles plus the Rambo brand equal guaranteed ticket sales. So why build awareness for a new franchise when you could just slap the most bankable action name on the planet across the poster and then call it a day? Posters even borrowed the Rambo-style font and visual branding, blurring the line between John Spartan and John Rambo so aggressively that you'd think they shared a bank account, which, in theory, never mind, I digress. Now picture being a moviegoer in Kuwait in 1993. You bought your ticket, you're expecting mud and bandanas and helicopters exploding over a rainforest, but instead, the lights go down and you're watching platinum blonde Wesley Snipes doing karate in a cryo-prison while Sandra Bullock explains how society banned handshakes? That's not a sequel, that's an ambush. Hey, quick pause before someone gets fined for excessive violence. If you're enjoying this deep dive into Demolition Man's behind-the-scenes chaos, hit that like button. It tells YouTube that you want more wild 80s and 90s movies deep dives. And let us know in the comments, are you Team Taco Bell or Team Pizza Hut? Me? I think I'm Team Taco Bell guy. All right, now back to St. Angeles. Number 7, Jack Black was hiding in the sewer the whole time. Next time you watch Demolition Man, keep your eyes locked on the underground scenes, because a then unknown Jack Black is hiding down there. His credited role is Wasteland Scrap Number 2, which sounds less like a movie character and more like something you'd write on a resume during a rough year. You can spot him when Spartan and Lenina head underground to meet Dennis Leary's Edgar Friendly. Black's tucked in among the rebels, and he actually has a line. He points at Stallone, lights up a fuse, and blurts out, "He's the one! He's the one who's gonna kill Phoenix!" The delivery is pure, uncut, just early Jack Black energy. This was 1993, 7 years before High Fidelity turned him into the loudest record store employee in cinema history. A full decade before School of Rock. He was grinding through bit parts and small roles, trying to get a foothold in an industry that hadn't quite figured out what to do with him yet. Now, once you notice him, it's impossible to unsee. Those expressive eyebrows, that manic enthusiasm radiating off a guy with maybe 4 seconds of screen time. He stands out among the extras like a future rock star who accidentally wandered into a dystopian support group. Number 6, Sandra Bullock was never supposed to be here. Before Sandra Bullock became everyone's favorite wide-eyed future cop, the role of Lenina Huxley belonged to Lori Petty. She was cast, she showed up, she filmed for 2 or 3 days, and then she was gone. Producer Joel Silver pulled the trigger. Petty was out. The official reason? It was never public, but Silver just pulled the plug and moved on. Then, Sandra Bullock stepped into a role that would help launch her into the stratosphere. Now here's what makes the casting switch even more interesting. When Bullock walked onto that set, well, speed hadn't happened yet. She wasn't America's sweetheart. She wasn't a household name. She was a working actress who got a last-minute call on a major studio production and had roughly no time to overthink it. She just showed up and out-charmed everyone. The character's name is also a quiet literary wink that most people drove right past. Lenina Huxley, as in Aldous Huxley, the guy who wrote Brave New World, a novel about a sanitized, pleasure-controlled society where individuality gets quietly suffocated by a benevolent system. The filmmakers named their optimistic future cop after the author whose entire career warned against optimistic future societies. That's either very clever or extremely on the nose. Maybe both. Number 5, the Hungarian novel that almost sued Hollywood. Demolition Man had an international plagiarism scandal attached to it, and almost nobody in the US ever heard about it. Now, Hungarian author Istvan Nemere claimed that the film lifted heavily from his 1986 novel Holtek Harka, which translates to Fight of the Dead. And the premise is uncomfortably close. In Nemere's book, a terrorist and counterterrorism soldier are cryogenically frozen, then wake up in a peaceful future society where violence has essentially been deleted from the operating system. You swap in Stallone and Snipes, you add some Seashells, and you've got yourself a Warner Brothers release. Nemere submitted his novel to a Hungarian copyright authority, which he says concluded the film was a 75% match to his book. No independent documentation of that ruling has ever actually surfaced publicly, but nobody from Warner Brothers ever disputed it either. So why did this turn into a massive courtroom showdown? Well, because Nemere openly admitted that he couldn't afford to take on Warner Brothers from Eastern Europe. In the 90s, launching a cross-border intellectual property fight against a Hollywood studio, well, that required the kind of money that selling Hungarian sci-fi novels absolutely did not generate. The lawsuit never materialized, and the whole thing, it quietly faded into obscurity. Now, to be fair, cryogenic prisoners waking up in sanitized utopias, it's not exactly a brand new concept. Sci-fi's been freezing people and thawing them into weird futures for decades. Warner Brothers never commented. The Seashells stayed, and Istvan Nemere, he's still waiting on a check that probably won't come. Number 4, the explosion that saved the entire movie. That massive explosive opening where Stallone dives through flames and Wesley Snipes turns a city block into a parking lot, well, that wasn't in the original script. The earliest drafts of Demolition Man started in 2032. The movie opened with cryo chambers and exposition, which is a bold choice for a Stallone action film and also kind of a terrible one. Screenwriter Fred Dekker came in for uncredited rewrites and made the structural call that arguably saved the entire movie. He pushed for the 1996 prologue, and his reasoning was beautifully simple. If you don't show Kansas, well, Oz isn't all that special. The man understood the assignment. Without seeing Spartan and Phoenix in full 90s chaos mode, the explosions, hostages, platinum blonde chaos energy, the sanitized future of San Angeles is just kind of a polite city. Mildly weird, vaguely sterile, but drop the audience into raw, unapologetic destruction first, and then smash cut to a world where swearing costs you money? I mean, come on. That contrast is the entire joke. Spartan feels like a caveman thawed out in a yoga studio. Phoenix feels like a live grenade rolling across the floor of a meditation retreat. Without the prologue, you lose both of those dynamics, and you're left with a fish-out-of-water comedy that forgot to show us the original water. But once that opening was locked in, the whole movie clicked into place. Number 3, the deleted daughter that accidentally ruined test screenings. Demolition Man almost had an emotional gut punch, and it got ripped out in the editing room. In early versions of the script, John Spartan had a daughter named Catherine who survived into 2032 and was living underground with the scraps. When Spartan finally finds her, she's roughly 50 years old, physically older than her own father. That's not an action beat, that's heavy sci-fi drama, and they actually filmed it. But the subplot got axed for pacing, and that single edit accidentally detonated a completely different problem. Spartan's daughter is still referenced in the dialogue, but she never appears on screen. So test audiences did what test audiences do. They filled in the blanks themselves. Sandra Bullock's Lenina Huxley was the only other prominent woman in the movie, and a significant chunk of viewers walked out of early screenings convinced that she was Spartan's daughter, which turned the virtual sex scene into something that the filmmakers absolutely did not intend. The reaction was bad enough that the final cut had to make Huxley's role painfully clear. Fan, colleague, definitely not a relative. There's even a ghost of the deleted storyline still visible in the finished film. During the underground shootout, Spartan instinctively shields one specific female scrap from gunfire. That actress, Casey Wallace, was playing his daughter in the original script. It's a blink and you miss it remnant of a movie that almost went in a completely different direction. Number 2, an R-rated movie got a toy line. Even with the main character being a villain who murders people with genuine enthusiasm, Mattel looked at all of that and decided, yeah, that belongs in the toy aisle, right next to Barbie's dream house. In 1993, Mattel released a full Demolition Man action figure line. And because spending money on fresh molds would have been too responsible, they recycled parts from their failed 1989 reboot, The New Adventures of He-Man. Every John Spartan figure was essentially He-Man squeezed into a future cop Halloween costume. Same torso, same limbs, completely different career path. Simon Phoenix shared body parts with obscure He-Man villains like Vizar and Kalamar, which is a sentence that should not exist, and yet here we are. The lineup included 4 different versions of Spartan, 2 versions of Phoenix, and 0 Lenina Huxley figures. Sandra Bullock helped carry the entire film, and Mattel's response was, yeah, the best we could do is another Stallone repaint in a slightly different shade of blue. Around this time, if you were an action movie and a focus group liked you, you were getting a toy line. Terminator 2 got a toy line, RoboCop got one. If it bled on screen, it was getting a blister pack and a spring-loaded accessory. The rating system was more of a suggestion than a barrier. The Demolition Man figures were warm in clearance bins by 1994, but they've since become collector favorites. Not because they were well made, but because they're the most perfectly absurd artifact of 90s corporate marketing. And number 1, the franchise wars were real, just not the ones you think. In Demolition Man's version of 2032, something called the franchise wars wiped every restaurant off the face of the earth. Every single one. And the lone survivor of total corporate annihilation was Taco Bell. The studio actually approached Taco Bell about being the punchline of an R-rated dystopian satire, and Taco Bell said yes, immediately.
Yeah, boy.
The chain watched a movie called their food The Last Cuisine Standing after the collapse of civilization and thought, yeah, we can work with that. Hey, respect, TB. Now here's where it gets strange. In 1993, Taco Bell barely existed outside of North America. You can't build a dystopian gag around a restaurant that your entire audience has never heard of. The joke? It dies on arrival. So the studio pulled off something almost unheard of at the time. They ripped Taco Bell out of the movie completely and dropped Pizza Hut in for European releases. Stallone and Bullock re-recorded dialogue. Signs were digitally swapped. Logos were replaced across the board. This was a full surgical operation on a finished film, and it was only possible because both chains were owned by PepsiCo at the time. Same corporate overlord, just different menu. That swap created decades of genuine confusion. Entire Mandela effect arguments have been fueled by grown adults screaming at each other about which fast food chain won a fictional war. And there you have it, guys. 15 weird and wild facts about Demolition Man. So what fact surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments, and hey, share this with a friend who still doesn't know how to use the 3 seashells. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. And until next time, put the seashells down. This is Remember When.